Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel and to this full effort overlay of my hill climb performance up the Great Dun Fell. What I called in a recent video the highest road climb in the UK. I think what I meant by that was like this is probably the largest hill climb you can do in the UK in terms of, you know, the elevation you top out at 840 meters above sea level nearly, and you climb a total of just over 600 meters over the course of about 7 kilometers, an average gradient of about 8%. But as you'll see from this, there's going to be lots of different varying gradients, and it's one that I really prefer of all the types of climbs. Like, you know, Sacalobra, for example, in Mallorca is very straightforward, like very little changes in terms of gradient there. Whereas this climb, there's always something to think about. So there's a bunch of information on the screen. I'll run you through it. We have right at the bottom, we obviously have the elevation and the climb laid out. We have power just above that, and we have the gradient of the climb, my heart rate, the temperature, which is also interesting. It does get really cold at the top. And then to the left and right we have speed, cadence, and some nice maps of the course as well. So like I said in the video, this climb I really wanted to ride myself into it. A negative split would be important, so I would start off slightly easier than hopefully I would finish. And the wind conditions today, well, the wind conditions on this climb, they always play a part in the speed at which you can climb. And it has more of an effect on this section here where you have the shallower gradients. You know, when you start to get to the steeper gradients, if you have a headwind, of course, that'll slow you down, you know, no shadow of a doubt. But when the gradient is at its steepest, you've got a tailwind, doesn't really help you. When you're on a flatter gradient like these at the bottom, the wind can have a serious impact on your speed. You know, you could be doing, you know, 30 kilometers an hour here on a calm day, but with a headwind, of course, you could be barely doing 25 kilometers an hour. Likewise, if you've got a tailwind, you know, that's obviously going to help you for a lot less effort. So in terms of the actual conditions, obviously visibility is good, but in terms of the wind and the direction, probably not as good as it could be. You could have a calmer day, it would have been much better, but the wind was kind of coming off of my or hitting my right shoulder here as we speak. So this wall is protecting me a little bit, but once we turn around to the right here, it's sort of just coming into your face a little bit. So as you negotiate the lower slopes here, the first couple of kilometers, it's just nagging. It's just coming at you a little bit. So my heart rate is gradually rising. I think I average about high 160s, low 170s for this course, but it gradually ramps up throughout, and that obviously matches with my pacing strategy. If I was to set off a lot harder, obviously my heart rate would increase along with the effort earlier on. But as you'll see later on, we get to the steeper section, that's where I really start reaching my maximum heart rate for this whole course. So I noticed, you know, using Strava and things, that quite a few riders actually set off quite hard at the bottom. And I think actually the second place finisher, if you compare the times like virtually on the road, I was actually slower up until the first half of this climb than second and third place. I think I was about 10 seconds in arrears, but as the climb goes on, the tables turn and I actually end up opening the time up going in the other direction, and that is primarily down to the pacing strategy. A lot of people I noticed produced their best 5 or 10 minute power in the first 5 and 10 minutes. And this climb takes, well, it took me, you know, 23 minutes nearly. But my best 5 minute power comes not so much in the last 5 minutes, but probably in the 15 to 20 minute time duration. So yeah, about 15 minutes into this climb, when we get to the steepest section, and I catch up with Simon Warren, who many of you will know is Mr. 100 Climbs. He's written many books on many climbs. So yeah, I actually wanted to draw some comparisons as well, because obviously this climb is super long. It's the closest thing you can get to, you know, there's a couple of climbs in the UK, in fairness. You know, there's Laverack Bar up in Scotland, you know, Applecross Pass. You know, there are a couple of climbs in Wales as well, which are, you know, long-ish. You're talking like 4 or 5 kilometers, but generally they'll be, you know, on the shallower side, 5, 6, 7%. But this climb, in terms of its average gradient of, you know, near enough 8% with the steeper sections, for 7 to 8 kilometers, I think you know, it's one of the hardest climbs over this length, and it's very similar to what you would get out in Europe then, I suppose. And I wanted to draw some comparisons to a climb that many of you are probably familiar with now, the Col de la Loze, which is featured in the Tour de France a couple of times over the last few years, the men's Tour de France. And I think it'll be most known for the day where Pogacar cracked properly, the day after the time trial that Jonas beat him on. I think that would have been 2023 Tour de France then? Would have been 2023 or 2022? I think it could have been 2022. I'm not 100% sure. I should really know that, because I was there. But the last part of the Col de la Loze, and obviously we're talking like, you know, we're talking 1,600 meters above sea level, going up to 2,200 meters, 2,300 meters above sea level. Obviously, this climb, you know, it's only it starts at 200 meters and it finishes at just over 800 meters above sea level. But in terms of the comparison of gradient, I wanted to talk about like the VAM, and, you know, let's just compare, you know, like the achievements that these pro riders are, or the achievements, the performances that they're doing. You look at the VAM, which is, you know, really how fast they're climbing, how many meters per hour they're climbing at. And if you look at Strava, you know, Pogacar from the 2020 Tour de France is very close to Felix Gall, who actually I think it was 2023 Tour de France then, because Felix Gall set this time up there with a VAM of 1644, 1,644 meters per hour, and that was the pace he was climbing at. And actually, my pace at Great Dunfell is very similar. It's 1,643. But, you know, obviously it goes to show the level of these, you know, Tour de France riders when they're doing it in the third week, or, you know, they're doing it after 140 kilometers of high mountains. And you also factor in the, you know, what that would be sea level equivalent wise. You know, like, essentially I'm doing a climb that, you know, it's not like, there's plenty of oxygen. I'm not getting affected even at 800 meters above sea level, really. But you're talking on the Col de la Loze, you know, even when I rode up there, but I've never done an effort up there, but you're talking like anywhere between 5 or 10% difference in power, really, you know, at that altitude for a lot of riders. You know, obviously the fitter they are, maybe the difference, or the more acclimatized they are, the difference is going to be smaller. But yeah, I just thought, you know, considering I was doing this fresh and at sea level, you know, my VAM is slightly less than, you know, what World Tour riders are doing on one of the hardest, highest mountains that they can do in the Tour de France. So I just wanted to throw that out there for a bit of context, really. But anyway, let's talk about the climb as a whole. I averaged 378 watts. Normalized was 380, so only a 2 watt difference. So I was pretty steady the whole way, and there is only one moment where my power drops, and that's a little bit further up, where we come to a plateau, and you'll see it because there's an incredible view in front of us of like the final steep section. If you've never ridden up here, you know, it's a real treat actually, because it is a really cool climb. So I was catching this rider in front of me, and I was paying close attention to my power at this moment because I didn't really want to get carried away. I didn't want to, you know, see that rider in front of me and go, right, I'll try and get across really quickly. Like, I wanted to make sure that I still focused on my own effort, really. So this section going into a headwind, you could actually feel it. I've muffled out the wind noise, but yeah, you could definitely feel there was a headwind here. And just as we come up to this corner, where we sort of bear around to the left, we're going to pick up a tailwind. So it's only this last, well, we don't pick up a tailwind here, as you can probably tell from the map on the left hand side. We're still generally heading in the same sort of direction, so we're kind of getting like a cross headwind. And it's only that top section where the road tends to swing to the left. We kind of get like a real strong tailwind, which obviously you're going to notice more when you're at 800 meters above sea level. So closing in on number 68, I was number 70. There wasn't the rider that was supposed to start a minute in front of me didn't show up, so that was the first rider that I would see on the road, number 68. And we spoke about it at the top, I think, that he did a phenomenal ride, and was very pleased with it. And I think I can't remember if it was him that said or whether it was Simon Warren. Like, they were talking about how maybe they went a little bit too hard at the bottom, and it's taken me the best part of 12 minutes nearly to catch that rider for 2 minutes. And they said, I don't know if I'm mixing this up with somebody else, but they said that they thought that I'd catch them earlier, and I said, well, I don't think, you know, I think you're on a really good day. I think, you know, in all fairness, like, you know, if you're going strong, like, I'm not necessarily going to catch you. But as it turned out, I think I ended up putting, so it took me 12 minutes to catch the rider that was 2 minutes in front of me. But then I think over the next 10 minutes, I think I put more than 2 minutes into that rider, if that makes sense. So because I paced it differently, and because I saved something for the, you know, I guess the steepest section, that's where I made more time on the riders that had gone, you know, slightly harder at the bottom. But to be honest, I think, you know, one thing that I would have liked to have, and this is the first time I've gone up this climb. Well, I've ridden that bit and tried to go for the Strava KOM, but the weather wasn't great that day either, and I had to open the gates as well. But this is the first time I've had a clear run, you know, going at it up here. So I think, you know, if I could learn a bit more about the climb and where to put down power, I think I could probably see a slightly faster time if I'd invested more lower down. But this was a really important bit here, so this is just coming onto that flat section. You would have seen me just surge to get sort of over it and onto this, well, it is flat now, you know, 0%, 0.5%. We are going slightly downhill in a second. So really all that matters here is speed, and I essentially, to stop myself from pushing too much, because I think I can get carried away sometimes, I just put in my biggest gear. And you can see my cadence is really low, and I just sort of gently pushed my legs over. Like, I wasn't really, you know, I was doing 250 watts. Okay, that's not like gentle, but you know, I was literally just, I was kind of following the pedals round. I wasn't really pushing hard, and that was just to keep the rhythm a little bit, because I knew that this next section, because it was so steep, if I was to go onto that flat section there and, you know, still try and press like really hard, I was probably going to run out of gears, and my cadence would be really high, you know. And then when I hit this next section, which you'll now see like double-digit gradient for a good few minutes now, my cadence is going to drop, and then what I'm doing is my rhythm is getting broken up by the fact that I've just spun like a really high cadence on that section, and I'm now going into this section which is like, you know, really low or could be a low cadence, could be, you know, in the 80s, And if I was pressing on that slight downhill or the flat bit, I could be in, you know, 100 RPM range. And going between those differences, you know, when you're on a hard effort and you've been going for a long period of time, because this is, you know, this is a bit more different to a really short climb, because, you know, rhythm matters, and you know, trying to find the sweet spot, and a lot of it is down to how it feels, and you're always checking in with yourself, because it is a long way. It's like doing a 10-mile time trial. You know, you're on this mountain for so long. So I made sure that I was not getting carried away too much on that flat bit, so that I could invest more here. So this section is actually the part where I put down my best 5-minute power of the whole climb, and I average 398 watts, and the VAM actually for this section, because it's about just over a kilometer at 14%. We're climbing at a rate of just under 2,000, so 1,967, which is quite fast now. This is quite you know, if I was to do a flat out effort up here, you could be looking at, you know, 2,200, 2,300, but we're looking at, to be honest, I was actually trying to empty the tank here. I realized that once I get to the top of this bit, it's probably going to be quite difficult to, well, find a rhythm. I'm going to be in the last couple of minutes. There's going to be quite significant changes in gradient. Like, you know, we're going uphill here now. We're getting close to 20%, and to be honest, it honestly doesn't feel like it at the time. It all feels the same. Like when it gets to a certain gradient, when it gets to a certain steepness, you know, you're essentially just in one gear and you're just trying to get up it. Some great support there. So there's this tiny little plateau, and road surface gets quite bad there. A little bit of gravel, almost gravel riding, and you come to this last section, and this is probably, looking back on it, I was proud of the whole effort, but this is the bit where I think I probably went a little bit too hard, or maybe I was a little bit too ambitious with how hard I was pushing on the section that we've just seen. Like, although we do 400 watts for 5 minutes, and that was brilliant, I start to pay for it as we crest over the top here, and because we pick up that tailwind, it's even harder to keep you know, pressure and power on the pedals. So I end up cresting it, and things start to get a bit messy. But up until that point, you know, I've done 19 minutes at 380 watts, and Sacalobra, we're talking, I think we're talking maybe 5, 6, 7 watts more on Sacalobra. And actually time wise, because Sacalobra's, my PB is 24:18, I think. I mean, you're talking 24:18. So this effort today was just under 23 minutes at a, so, you know, let's say 2 minutes less for argument's sake, and also about 5 watts less. So the proudest thing for me in this effort, or the biggest thing I took away, was that, like, you know, this is the first time I've done a climb in the UK that's as big as anything I've done in Europe, where I've able to replicate essentially one of my best performances, which was in really good conditions. You know, Mallorca is going to be, you know, nice road, you know, sweeping bends, you know, traffic free, because it was that early in the morning on Sacalobra. You know, perfect pacing, you know, really high power output, and I was really happy with it. It's really strong effort. It's the first time I've really been able to replicate it in the UK, but also in conditions that aren't anywhere near what they are in Mallorca, really. Like, it's getting close to 3 or 4 degrees at the top. You you know, the climb is not you know, a steady gradient whatsoever throughout, so there's a lot to think about, there's a lot happening. So that's what I was most proud of. And yet it had, really, on the face of it, like, you know, you did just seem like, you know, you should just be, I'm just proud of the effort in general. But when I compare it to, like, something then that is done in ideal conditions, sometimes I feel like it's worth sitting back sometimes and looking at the big picture, and where, you know, you might think like, you know, I might look back at this and I go, oh, I didn't finish very strong, you know, it's not my best ride, I could have done that better. But, you know, there's always a positive to be found in it, and sometimes I always look outside the box and try to find those things. So yeah, but here's the top section. The speed has really kind of picked up now as that tailwind has caught us from behind, and there was a couple of riders who had just finished and were not far from the top at all here. They just turned around and come back down, and actually you can't even see, like, to the left there, you can't even really see much because we are so high now that there's not really much to see. You know, nothing in the area is sort of as high as this. Well, not to our left anyway. But we left some warm clothes at the top. We were told it might be worth doing, so I did leave a coat at the top. And like I said in the video, some people have Everested this climb. Excuse me. Some people have been up here on a very regular basis, and they've never even, well, they've never seen the ball at the top. You know, the observatory or the weather station or whatever it is. They just haven't seen it, and they've been up here countless times. And you know, the weather is kind of unpredictable. Oh, there he is! Like the shout out to the man himself. What an incredible ride that was. On a recumbent, yeah, is it recumbent they call it? I think it is, isn't it? Lie down, pedal with your arms. Oh, hats off. That's a long way to go, but yeah, puts it into perspective. And there it is. There's the ball, the football, sat on top of the mountain, and that's it. That's the effort. I kind of finish with a big sprint. I try to get a saddle and raise my power. It sort of happens, sort of doesn't happen, but I'm glad I got everything out. But yeah, really enjoyed the climb. It's well worth it. I hope they do it next year, and I also hope they get a good entry like they did this year, because it was 70 riders. So yeah, thanks to everybody involved. It was a great one. I loved it, and I hope you enjoyed watching it.